We have before us a resolution on containment of Iran. Now, I have voted for sanctions on Iran and don't think it's a good idea that Iran have nuclear weapons. However, I'm very concerned about this particular resolution. I think a vote for this resolution is a vote for the concept of preemptive war. I know of no other way to interpret this resolution. The resolution says that containment, the strategy of trying to prevent expansion or invasion of countries, will never be our policy with regard to Iran. While I think it unwise to announce that we will contain Iran, I do think it unwise to tell Iran, oh, it's fine to get a nuclear weapon, we'll contain you. I also think it's equally unwise to say we will never contain you. The reason I say this is that we woke up one day and Pakistan had nuclear weapons. We woke up one day and Russia had nuclear weapons, China and India and North Korea. Had we made the statement, the rash statement, that we will never contain any country that has nuclear weapons, what does that mean? I think that means that you've decided right now, before anything happens, you've decided that you will preemptively go to war. We've been at war for a decade now. We've been at war in Afghanistan, and I supported going to Afghanistan, but I'm ready to come home from Afghanistan. We were at war in Iraq for nearly 10 years. I'm glad we're coming home from Iraq, but I don't want to automatically commit our country to a war in Iran. President Reagan was once criticized and accused of having no foreign policy. He replied that it wasn't that he had no foreign policy, it was that he didn't care to share it with everyone. Because if you give everyone, your potential enemies or friends, if you say to every country, if you do X, I'll do X, or if you maybe do this, I'll do that, you're exposing exactly what your plans are, and that may not be the best strategy. In other words, foreign policy is an ever-shifting battleground, and there should be a certain strategic ambiguity to foreign policy. So when we announce to Iran or to the world that we will never, ever contain Iran, it's an announcement that the bombs will be dropping if we ever hear that they are a nuclear power. I don't think we should say automatically we're willing to accept them as a nuclear power, but I don't think we should automatically say that there will be a preemptive war with Iran. Now, everybody's been bragging. They say, oh, everybody's in the Senate is for this. Well, everybody's not. I'm not for this. I may be alone on this. But interestingly, if you travel to Israel, there's a very spirited debate on this. Meir Dagan, who's the head of the Mossad, cares deeply about Israel, would not be, by anyone's imagination, accused of being a shrinking violet. He's done many things to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. He's worried about what happens the minute the bombs start dropping on Iran. Where do you think the next set of bombs come? They'll be on Tel Aviv. They won't be on the U.S., but if you live in Tel Aviv, you might have some concern over what happens and what does Iran do. The other thing about beginning a war is that historically our country, we have had defensive wars. Nobody messes with us, and I agree with that. You mess with the United States, there will be significant repercussions. We won't let you invade other countries, and we won't let you invade the United States. But the idea that we will have offensive war and not defensive war is a concept that is new in our history. Preemptive war, going to war and saying we will go to war to prevent you from doing certain activities, is a new concept in our lexicon of foreign policy. And I think it's a dangerous one. Announcing to the world, as this resolution does, that containment will never be our policy is unwise. It's a recipe for perpetual war. A country that vows to never contain an enemy is a country that vows to always preemptively attack. To rule out containment as a strategy or as a strategic and sometimes militarily active form of defense is to admit that we have become Orwellian. Yes, we have always been at war with East Asia. Or yes, we have always been at war with Eurasia. It's an idea that we will always be perpetually at war. Now, I'm proud of being for a strong national defense. I'm proud of being for protecting our country. But I cannot accept a resolution that says we will completely get rid of the containment strategy that really was a strategy that kept us safe for 60 years during the most aggressive and dangerous war we've ever encountered, the Cold War. The Soviet Union had 30,000 intercontinental ballistic missiles that could reach the United States and attack us and devastate our country. If we would have had this concept that we rule out the idea of containment, we would have had an awful and devastating and maybe cataclysmic war with Russia. Now, North Korea is more similar to Iran, a two-bit dictatorship that has trouble feeding their own people, has trouble having enough supplies of food and gasoline for their own people. There are similarities. But when North Korea announced that they had a nuclear weapon, did we immediately start dropping bombs? Did we say we won't contain them? We contained North Korea. And some would argue that the leadership of North Korea is equally as irrational as the leadership of Iran, if not more so. So we are able to contain a two-bit socialist, very small and unproductive country like North Korea. I see no reason why, if we had to, we couldn't contain Iran. Now, I'm not promoting that as a philosophy. We shouldn't be telling Iran we'll contain you. But for goodness sakes, we shouldn't be saying we will never contain you. The people who vote for this resolution, I think, are well-meaning, but I don't think they're thinking this through. And we've had this before. When the resolution came up for the Iraq War, many voted for it. And then some came back later and say, well, I voted for it before I voted against it. They wanted it both ways. Many come up to me now and say, I voted for the Iraq War, but it was a mistake. I voted for this concept of offensive war, of preemptive war, to stop Iraq from having weapons of mass destruction, but I made a mistake. I think the Iraq War was a mistake. I wasn't here, but I would have voted no. I fear that we're pushing on. Every month there has to be a new and more bellicose resolution to ensure that we will go to war and that at all costs we will go to war in Iran. I think it's a mistake. Does anybody here argue that we would have been much better if containment would not have been a strategy? If we would have said, absolutely to Russia, if you do this, we are going, the bombs will drop tomorrow. That scares me. But what scares me more is that so many members of this body are just jumping up and down to embrace each other in the bipartisan desire that we will not have containment as a strategy, that we absolutely will go to war if we wake up and Iran has nuclear weapons. You know what? The other day, Meir Dagan, the former head of the Mossad, said that you can't bomb nuclear knowledge out of the psyche. Nuclear knowledge, the knowledge to make nuclear weapons, is out there now, and it's in Iran, and we'll not be able to stop that knowledge. We'll not be able to eradicate the knowledge of nuclear weapons. That's something to think about, because there may come a day, and this is the prelude to the next argument. The next argument we have on this floor will be one day when Iran announces, and I'm not for this, I think we should do everything. I voted for sanctions. I think we should do everything to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. But my goodness, this is a huge mistake. And it may be unpopular for me at home to say this, but I will say it, and I will say it loudly. To rule out any kind of defensive strategy that doesn't include an offensive war is a huge mistake for the country. I'm not asking that we do nothing. We just beefed up the sanctions a couple of months ago. But you know, there are other things to do besides saying we will always have to go to war. For example, who does Iran trade with? You know the reason why the sanctions probably won't ultimately work? Because Iran trades with China and Russia and India and Japan, and they're exempt from the sanctions. Or we say they have sanctions, but then we give them exemptions, and they sell all their oil somewhere else. We really don't have the power to shut Iran down through sanctions. If we were to convince somehow Russia and China to be on our side, we could have leverage, and I think Iran would listen. The sanctions have brought them back to the table. They are negotiating. I don't for 1 minute believe everything they say or think that they're trustworthy, but it's better than war to have negotiations, even with a fallible and perhaps deceitful partner sometimes, but it's still better than war. I think there is such an eagerness or such a lack of reluctance in this body to think through the issues of war, and that's how we get into this. We get into it because everybody wants to be stronger than the next guy. Everybody wants to be more bellicose than the next guy. Everybody wants to say, nobody pushes us around and we're not going to take it. Our soldiers are not inanimate clay that we put on this master board of chess, this geopolitical chess game to move around. These are young men and women who live in your neighborhood, who live in the neighboring town. And when I think about war, when I think about this resolution, I don't think about empty black and white words on a page. I think about those young men and women and my commitment, my real and strong commitment that I'm not going to war without absolute provocation, without a threat to the national security, and for goodness sakes, without a debate over it. I hope that those who have glommed onto this resolution so quickly, because there is an incredible force behind this resolution. There's an incredible lobbying apparatus that says you've got to go on to this or else. I hope they'll reread this and reconsider. Think about the double and triple amputees that have come home to your town. Think about the soldiers who have committed suicide. Think about the hundreds of thousands of soldiers who are overseas now, and ask yourself, are we ready to send another 100 or 200,000 or 300,000 soldiers to Iran? Preemptive war, going to war and saying, we will go to war to prevent you from doing certain activities, is a new concept in our lexicon of foreign policy. And I think it's a dangerous one.